Okay, Michael. Thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking your time out and on a Saturday night, and
Well, thank you very much for
being
having
here.
me, my friend. It's an honor to be here. I know that you are somewhat local and, of course, have explored some of the same spots that I've intrepidly traversed. I'm sure you've done the same. Well, I don't know. Maybe at some points there are areas that we need to talk about within these places that we're exploring that should be more intriguing than logical. Let's put it that way.
Now, where are you? Where do you live?
I'm out of Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, I'm in Clinton.
Yes. Only
So
a
we're right
stone's
up,
throw away.
you're right up the street. So, do you want to give us a quick rundown of who you are? We all know that you're the Dark Hour Paranormal host, and you cover many subjects. But do you want to give us a condensed version of who you are and what got you into this?
Sure. I'd be happy to. The challenge here is the condensed part, but I will keep it brief. I promise. So I started into esoterics as a field back when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. I was very fascinated with shows such as, Unsolved Mysteries. You had Arthur C. Clarke putting out different presentations. There were a lot of different bigger names in that time that were in the field of ufology, the paranormal. Some of this intersected again with Unsolved Mysteries, different crimes that were being committed that, didn't seem to have a logical path. This is where I really started to take notice that something was different in respect to perception, perhaps, of our reality, again, at such a tender young age. Now, around 12 or 13, as most of us do, we start questioning the world. Perhaps puberty is to blame for this. Perhaps it's something more in intrinsic, I would say. But at any rate, my mother felt that, I think intuitively, she felt that I could have a reading from somebody that she very well knew and trusted. And of course, in cross-referencing that with this clairvoyant, she also felt that that was something that I would benefit from. So I was having a lot of trouble, not only in social circles, but at home within my school life. I mean, I had ADD as a kid, was medicated for this type of thing. So a lot of you have gone through this, but we also understand that attention deficit is something it's different than what people had initially thought it was. But, without getting into that, that was still something I was wrestling with. And of course, finding my place in the world. So I went to this psychic and I met this woman. Her name was Joyce Orcutt. She's a very, very wonderful lady. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she did sit down and give me a full on reading and went into certain things about living past lives or living in the future, or, attributes that I may have latently possessed that I didn't necessarily have awareness yet of that type of blossom that would happen maybe 5, 7, 10 years from, this time that we were sitting and talking. And it really gave me an insight that it wasn't about taking what she said for granted and just going on the straight linear path that this is exactly what's going to happen. It was very much stressed that these are potential outcomes as long as you follow the path that you inherently would.
Like tarot cards. That's what tarot cards are supposed to be for. Right.
I think anything that has to do with that outside of a very stark premonition, which even in that sense, it has to be in context, can be augmented given the decisions and choices that we make going forward. Nothing's set in stone, right? But if you continue sliding down that one slide you chose, at the end, this is what might look like if you don't jump off first, so to say, simply. Yeah. So again, that really opened up my eyes, and I started to ask my mother about different concepts. She introduced me to near-death experiences and, basically what she could give me on that realm. It wasn't as extensive as what I, eventually went into, but it was a fantastic starting point. I read the book Embraced by the Light by Betty J. Eady, who I've actually had on the show and interviewed. Fantastic woman. But this is one of the most comprehensive near-death experiences to date that we have documented and recorded. And again, it just propelled me further into the curiosity about this other side of perception that perhaps most people don't necessarily have awareness of. Now, I carried this with me all the way through my teen years and into my 20s. I was certified in Reiki, Usui Reiki, when I was 19. I have a mastery level in that. Of course, prior to that, for about 4 years, I was working with energy, and we just called it energy healing. We didn't have a name for the modality, but we were doing it. And I started to look a little bit further into my peripherals, and I found people like Drinvala Melchizedek, and I found people like Al Bielek, and I found people like Duncan Cameron and Preston Nichols. Solara 1111. I found all of these people that were out there, Phil Schneider, talking about what they had to share. And it was around this time that I was really introduced to some of what I further studied later on. Melchizedek was a very big influence because, like myself, he's sort of this rounded character in respect to esoterics and how they all interrelate. Usually for him, it's based on sacred geometry at the end of the day, but nonetheless, he has a very fine argument that's hard to press anything against. So that got me into that study, and it was literally a downhill slide into many different avenues of research, getting into radio myself around 2001, 2002. I had a radio show on WNHU 88.7 down in New Haven, Connecticut. And I started to get my legs within the interviewing world and speaking to people on a professional level in doing that. Now, it was a hip hop show. It was an underground hip hop show, but I still conducted and organized interviews and created the show as it was. So moving forward, I'm an accomplished musician. I've traveled, many times with different projects. So I took about 7 or 10 years after this, going into my early 30s to pursue that. I did some ghost investigating at that time. I think it was 2008, 2009. I formed Dark Hour Paranormal with one other individual. And we actually had something slated for television, which we were filming the pilot. And fortunately, out of 2 locations that we had gone to, I caught 2 separate attachments that wreaked havoc with me for about 3 months each. And believe it or not, one of those locations, which was notorious for it, I knew that this was there already. The other one, I had no idea. I was being careful and staying away from where it had laid certain domain, and yet it came to me. And it was explained to me later, well, it must have been hungry. But it was exercised off another investigator that went out there 8 months prior to my arrival on the location. Now, I spoke to this person. Her name is Joni Mahan, and she actually caught this damn thing twice. And I think the second time was even worse than the first. But yeah, that's kind of what truncated that. So at that point, I stood back and I said, well, okay, that may not be the right way to ghost hunt, if you want to call it this. So what is? Well, how do we research this without being in certain peril? And I really went in myself and I started pulling out some of the more academic research, which eventually became more experiential. And that's what you see on the channel through interviews, through the documentaries. And of course, I have a lot of fantastic support around me. Dark Matter Digital Network, the late Art Bell's network, I'm on there. ThirdPhaseOfMoon, who you guys all know, we've worked extensively and continue to put out music between us and, work within the field of ufology. GUFON, Rich Giordano was a huge bolster in respect to giving me the confidence to continue on YouTube as a platform, because I came from radio, guys. It was completely different to have this visual aspect. I'm like, do I really have to do it? He's like, yeah, you do. I'm like, why? Because this is going to help convey even deeper whatever your message is, whatever you're talking about. People want that visual aspect these days. And again, in a nutshell, that's where we sit today, my friend.
So you're talking about these ghost hunts, and what was the term you used? Something attached itself?
Yes.
Did you say?
Yes.
In what capacity? What do you mean it attached itself, and where was this?
So this actually happened. The first one was at Rutland State Prison Camp out in Rutland. Yep. If you've ever been out there, it's quite a trek into the woods and you feel like you're going on the wrong path. But it was a very large span when it was in operation, something like 500-600 acres, if I'm not mistaken. I could be off by a few, but nonetheless, it was huge. Now, there aren't many standing structures there still, but there are some, the root cellar being the most notable and the most traversed. Now, I went out there many times prior to this investigation by myself, with other people. I never went with a whole group of people. I was always sort of against that. Too much energy involved, and direction just gets split. It's kind of a weird thing to watch when it happens, but disconcerting nonetheless. So, on this particular evening, I went with the 2 other guys I had on my team, and there was sort of a series of events that led up to my realization that something just wasn't right. Now, as we're in the root cellar, where we kind of parked it because we were told not to go towards the tunnels, this is where this thing roamed, I could feel the air just tightening. And you're sort of expecting something like that when you're in an environment where there's a possibility that a negative energy exists. You sort of have this preemptive thought that that's what you're going to feel. So perhaps psychosomatics at first, right? Well, unfortunately, there was a point where I had to dismiss that. I could actually feel what was in this area, and it was coming into my third eye as a visual representation of something very large. It was this dark shadow, kind of reminded me of what we perceive Mothman to be without the wings, and these really big red eyes. And the thing was screaming at me, "What do you want?" And just using all kinds of curse words, you know, anything that you can imagine under the sun. And I thought to myself, wow, I've never had anybody this upset or, you know, talk to me. I didn't feel like it was me personally.
Is this in your subconscious or right in front of you?
This is in my subconscious. It's nothing literal yet.
Okay.
As this is going on, you know, I'm referencing my experience with my guys here, and one of them says, "Well, I don't really feel much," and the other guy goes, "Yeah, I feel something here. I don't know what it is, but I can certainly feel it." And this guy eventually kind of lost his footing and fell on top of me, and I grabbed him. You know, big hulking guy from New York. I kind of crushed me. We both went down. Picked him back up, and I said, "You know, you're all right. We're in the semi-dark here." And he's like, "Yeah, I got dizzy, and I just couldn't stand all of a sudden." This is a guy who doesn't necessarily believe in the paranormal, but wanted to experience this with an open mind. And to this day, he'll tell you, "I can't say it was paranormal, but I had an experience that I simply can't explain." And that was over several investigations that we did together. So as this had happened, I picked him back up and I'm looking towards the exit of the root cellar. And as you know, someone who's been in there, you're looking out. The only light that you're really seeing is the light bouncing off the sky from the nearest city. And through this, I could see shadows immediately coming in, and they were filing around the sides as if, you know, you had a marble track and you just bunch of marbles came in, just slid right into position. Now, this happened with a lot of movement, but it was completely soundless. And that kind of really messed with my head for a moment, wondering why I'm seeing all this activity, but I can't hear anything. At the same time, I start witnessing what seemed like pops of light in front of me: orange, green, yellow, purple, blue, white, you name it, every color, like little fireflies that pop, pop, pop. And as I'm noticing, I says to my friend, I said, "Do you see this?" He goes, "Yeah, there are these little lights everywhere." I'm like, "What in God's name is that?" And immediately, as we're having this experience watching this, I see it physically come in. This thing's about 9-10 feet tall, this big black shadow, and it just comes in and it sort of spreads. And I don't know if it, you know, goes into these other, you know, entities or whatever the case was. I got the impression that this was Legion. Okay. And this was the overseeing energy, the overarching energy that encapsulated all these, you know, smaller energies the way that I would see it. It was not happy that we were there, right, to say the very least. And at that point, I kind of shook my head. I said, "Guys, I got to go outside. I got to take a breath." And they were like, "Yep, we're doing it too." So we went outside. And as we're out there, you know, some years ago, I used to smoke cigarettes. So I'm off, you know, having a smoke here, a couple, you know, few 10, 20 feet from the opening. Another guy's using the facilities behind me the opposite way. And I hear him talk to me about how he hears footsteps coming up into the root cellar. I didn't hear that. I was standing right next to him. I heard it clear as day, came right from over there. And he pointed over to the root cellar. I'm sorry, to the tunnels. And I said, "Wow, man, that's interesting." Even to this day, he doesn't have an explanation for that. And again, I was standing right where he said it happened, and I didn't hear it. So we went back into the root cellar. One of the guys said, "I'm not going back." And I said, "Come on, man." Yeah, I pulled a little Zach Bagans, you know, jerky stuff on him. I said, "We got to at least go get the equipment. This is what we came to do. Come on, let's go." So went in there, spent another 20 minutes, and that was it. I wrapped it up. Now, one of the things I noticed as we stepped out is that time while I was in that root cellar for that period just stopped or didn't exist. It was at a standstill. I had no perception of how much time had passed. I mean, even spatially, I was having trouble kind of hankering down what I was seeing in front of me and where my feet were underneath me after this. So got into the car, my friend was driving, and we start heading back. And, you know, I'm starting to feel really tight, like just don't feel well. Something's not right. You know, you just can't shake this feeling. And we're about halfway out of the woods. And I turned to him, I said, "Man, something's wrong." He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, Something's not right, man. I don't feel right." He goes, yeah, man. You know, I don't really feel right either." I'm like, no. Something's really not right here. I don't know what it is. And he couldn't help me on that. So brings me home. And that night had a very difficult time sleeping. Almost like there was this energy that was around me, just keeping me up. And from that point on, I started having these night terrors where I was being held down as the sort of like a sleep apnea was happening to me, and you get the sleep paralysis. But there was always this overarching dark energy that was present within my dreams. Now, if that wasn't enough, just to mess with somebody psychologically, they started affecting friends and family members that were around me. We still have an experience that happened with my sister around the same time. Long story short, she was out on some rafts in a very shallow river down in Connecticut and disappeared for about 6 hours. Found herself laying face down in the water as she came to somehow. Somebody had been walking through the dark, and the dog saw her down there, and she was weakly calling for help, pulled her out, and left.
Jeez.
Yeah. So as this transpired and unfolded, I heard in my head, "Do you see what I can do?" And I thought, man, this, I really wanted it to just kind of go away on its own. And I realized at that point that it wasn't going to, and I had to do something to confront it. Now, this isn't a conflict that I'm about to get into when I had to face this thing. This was meant to resolve and to be humble in respect to what you've asked. Because when you ask the spirit world, regardless of who you think's going to answer, when you ask them for something, they will come through. It may not be in the time that you want it to be. It may not be at the place that you are when you ask. But as a universal law, I've come to understand they will always honor it. So you go into some place that has a negative entity, and this thing is there, and you're calling who's here, who's there, blah, blah, blah. You're already inviting it in. So for me to go into this, and I will tell you that it was the overall experience of having something like this draining energy from you was akin to having someone hold a knife on your throat like this as you walk through your everyday life, knowing any moment they could just very quickly. That's it. And it's a feeling of dread, fear, anxiety, just overwhelming you every single moment of your day. Okay. That's what it feels like. Now, I finally had enough and realized again that this is what I needed to do. So I went into my mind's eye, because the damn thing was always there. I could close my eyes and I could always see it. So it keeps you in a constant hypervigilant state, if you will. So I closed my eyes and I went into my mind's eye. And as I confronted this thing, I asked it, and I'm going to have to paraphrase because I don't exactly recall the verbiage that I used, but something along the lines of, listen, I did call for you. It was to communicate, and perhaps it was for other spirits that were there on the property, not you specifically. And I do apologize that somehow you have, honored this call when it was not you I intended to work with. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but, within that time, that's what I felt. So I had to sort of reinforce this. I said it maybe 2 or 3 times differently in my mind's eye as I'm talking to this thing. And as I'm doing this, it starts to kind of back away a little bit. Just a little bit. And I keep going and I keep going, and it keeps going back all the way about a football field back in my mind's eye. I can see the thing crouching down, watching. That's where it stayed for another month or 2, and then it disappeared. And I have been confirmed to be clear of that since. But I played with fire, and I got out, man. I got out. Joni Mayhan was not as lucky, and she has 2 full books that talk about her experiences with that particular entity.
Mayhem.
Yeah.
So you go to this prison camp. Now, what's so special? Why is it always like places like prison camps and psychiatric hospitals? Now, why would an evil entity be hanging around there?
Well, the reason that particular entity is there is because there were a group of folks that went up there at one point, maybe 12, 13, 14 years ago, just before we had, the investigator that had kind of helped me learn about that area at the time had already had knowledge and dealings with the people and this particular entity. Right. Long story short, they went up there as a coven, released this thing out of the ground, if you will.
Knew it.
Had no idea how to put it back. So they said, that's it, we're out of here. And they left. And the thing just wanders around aimlessly because it's not supposed to be there, but it's predatorial. So that's the problem.
They went there because they knew it was like it had a reputation. So they went there messing around. It was a coven or just people doing a Ouija board?
I was told that it was some type of coven, but it was people who had satanic intentions when they were going out there. That was their bent, their belief modality was the black arts. But again, it's something that's so misunderstood that people go out and dabble with it and end up getting hurt themselves, or they hurt somebody else.
Man, that's crazy. So now, if this was an evil entity, like you just asking it without any kind of a ritual or anything to go away was enough.
Well,
you know what I mean?
For me, it was. And I have to tell you, even now, thinking back, I think that there was something very unique about that experience. I think that there was more at play, and I had more in respect to protection on my side, that perhaps at one point this entity just thought maybe it wasn't worth pursuing, but it was still there. And I still had to go through that experience. And probably in a larger picture, that was part of the agreement that I had with this entity before I incarnated here to have that experience. It shook me, man. Shook me.
I'm sure.
Changed the way I did everything.
Now, you talk about protection, especially in your video when you go into the Lancaster Blood Forest now, and you mentioned protection. So you're obviously protected in some manner. Now, what does that mean? What do you mean when you're protected?
Protection is really a very personal
right
decision in how you go about this. People have different belief systems, and yet we still understand there are physical objects that carry different vibrations that can be measured in one way or another. A lot of it has to do with intention. I mean, if you have a power object, the object itself isn't inherently powerful. It's the intention that you imbue within it. And that's always been, yes. God, yeah, that's a big example right there, man. That's a big example. But yes, there's a lot of that in that respect. Now, again, we are creating this reality in many different ways with the way that we are thinking. If you want to look at it on the surface, what you create in your own home, how you've decorated it, how you go about, the way brushing your teeth, everything is different for, different people, how we create reality and experience it. So, when you talk about some of these etheric fields and how they might intermesh with, what we're working with in the paranormal or, otherwise, there has to be a continuity that comes into play. And when you look at a place like Blood Forest or the Rutland State Prison Camp, there's history here. And whatever that vibration is, that's subtle as it may be, there's always going to be somebody who can go into it with the instrument that is the body, one of the most sensitive instruments that we have, and still feel something. The problem still is identifying what it is. Did I answer your question? I feel like I went off track.
No, you did. So yeah, you said that your protection was a personal thing that you carried with you. Now, would you go back to Rutland State Forest, or have you been kind of warned to stay away?
Yeah, I'm not to go back there.
You're not going to go back there anytime soon.
No, I'm never going to go back there. And there's a very specific reason for that. And of course, if you go to one of these places, you already attracted an entity like that.
Yeah.
I know the thing is still there. There are times where I've sat down and said, all right, I want to do a little something, for the channel today. Where am I going to go? And I would think about that place, and in my mind's eye, I'd literally be turned around the other way and pushed away. And I could feel, don't come here. Now, again, Joni had caught this thing twice. And the way that she caught it twice is she went the first time, had that experience, got it cleared off of her, and decided to go back to Rutland State Prison Camp under a different intention, still ghost hunting, but with different people and so forth, everything she had experienced. Had the idea and thought in her gut that this wasn't a good idea, went anyway, and boom, there it was again. So I'm certainly not going to be fall victim to something like that when I have the knowledge prior to,
Okay, so I think that Blood Forest is 10 minutes from where I live. And I just did a video from there. I felt nothing, of course. I've had experiences where I've astral projected. I've had things walking around my tent in Oklahoma, and I'm still unsure about all of this stuff. But did you feel anything in Blood Forest?
I certainly did. The overwhelming feeling was that I was being watched, and not just from one area, but it was from all over, man. It was omnipresent, if you will. And that was kind of the weird thing for me, because when I walked into, it was the first clearing when you come up that embankment as you come into the woods, and you get on the again, the first little clearing there. That's where I started feeling it predominantly. As I walked forward, I felt it there too, but that's where I stopped. And inherently, I looked behind me, expecting to feel something come from one area or another, and it was just it had expanded out. It was, oh my God, I'm surrounded. So
the swamp is right to your left there as you make that. You traverse that hill. I felt like it. All I felt like was the energy shifted. As soon as I walked down that hill, it was different.
You feel that first.
Geography. I don't know if it was a geography or just the light was different, or I definitely felt something. It was just different.
Well, I started feeling a little weird as I started walking by the body of water first, and I kind of noted it. I think I said it in the video too. And then when I went up into the clearing, that's when I got the more extensive version of that feeling, if you will.
That's weird. So let me go on to Monsterland. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this. Have you ever listened to the guy from Expedition Bigfoot, Ronnie LeBlanc? He talks a lot about Leominster State Forest, and we airsofted there. I've been there like my God 20 times. I've went in from all different directions, and I never got anything from Leominster State Forest.
No, I really haven't gotten too much. Something more subtle, maybe worth mention while I'm in there. But I think even in that video was a lot of observation of the land and the atmosphere around me, the environment. But then I've spoken to people who walk through that set of woods consistently, such as Jeremy Sanborn, and he assures me that there are certain places that are much more active than others. And in fact, he found a kill site there about 8-9 months ago. He shared some of the pictures. I have to tell you, no good reason for what happened. I mean, there was a small clearing, without divulging where this is. I really can't do that at the moment, but it is in the Leominster State Forest. There's a small clearing that wraps around with a couple trees that goes into another clearing. And when he took the videos and pictures, he showed me it was like snow had covered all of the grass and the foliage, but it was deer hair. It just like somebody had a pillow of deer hair and just poof, threw it everywhere. I mean, it just seemed like way too much deer hair for the couple carcasses that they had found. Now they found a dog carcass too. I think it was a coyote, and this thing had literally been twisted. Okay, the whole thing had been twisted up. Head was ripped. Limbs were dangling off. But I can't imagine what we have in respect to wildlife right now that could take a coyote's body and twist it like a freaking corkscrew. That's what it looked like.
Yeah.
So again, this was a site that Jeremy had mentioned was very active, and he had experienced things in this area before, but he'd never seen anything quite like this.
Well, the weird thing about it is if you go into Leominster State Forest and you open up the map, you've got like woods continuously to the border of Canada. So if there was some kind of Bigfoot activity around there, it can retreat. So that might have been the encounter that was had there in 2016, I think, on the BFRO website. I mean, that could have been just passing through, and there's so much land there; it's huge. So I don't know about spiritual activity, though. I mean,
it's just kind of interesting, and yeah, maybe there is some sort of animal out there that considers deer and coyote game, but it didn't look like the coyote was consumed. It looked like it had been brutally killed. So, what happened? Did it get in the way of some other creature taking down these deer for its meal, or what? And even if that were the case, what's big enough outside of a very large bear to do this type of thing?
Yeah, or some kind of ritual. I don't know. That was one of my questions in the last video I did. That whole satanic panic thing in the 80s and early 90s, how much of it was, and I've been delving into that a bit, how much of that was like hushed up. They found a couple of examples where they disproved all of the kids and stuff, but so they disproved all of it. But I've watched some like psychiatrists and doctors and stuff, that dealt with the kids from like the places like McMartin and stuff that have access to the medical reports, and they definitely say that they were victims of abuse. And, so
yes,
it wasn't all BS,
No, it certainly wasn't. There's truth to that. There's truth to that type of ideology, and I think it does go a little bit beyond intention. But we use different words, labels for what was considered something more natural. And I always give the example of native tribes using nature elements and nature spirits and dark energy versus the light energy. They had knowledge and interaction and synergistic relationships with some of what we would consider demons today. They just used that relationship the proper way. And for us to kind of walk into something like that without any knowledge, which I think many modern day people have. And yes, there is an entire occult side to our government and so forth. It runs very deep within the elite, if you will.
I think so too.
at this point, it's not even something that's debated. It's an absolute fact. It's just a matter of how far have they taken it based on what's been documented. But we have victims that have spoken out about this. And, back to when people were doing ritual sacrifice, such as the Aztecs, they had a different idea behind it. There was something much more progressive. People that are out there, working with the satanic side. I don't mean like the Church of Satan. I mean working with, magic that's deleterious and destructive. They sort of embody the opposite side of what we're doing here. They're sort of the shadow end of humanity, which is part of all of us. But for whatever reason, that's what they're choosing to experience at that time, and it seems to be in contrast to what we're doing collectively as a progressive species. So, these kind of folks don't necessarily value life the way that, perhaps you and I do. And when you bring in something like the dark arts into this, it can be a very slippery slope at that point.
What do you think of the Warrens? Obviously you're up on the Warrens and stuff. What do you think of those guys? I've been doing a lot of digging into and I've heard I've heard certain things about them and stuff, but their intentions, what do you think their intentions were?
I think the Warrens were genuine. I do think that they were very sincere in their work. Were there times that they possibly had the opportunity to make a little money on what they were doing? Certainly. Do I think they kind of overstepped that boundary? Probably not as much as people believe. I think that Lorraine was, out of the two of them, the most grounded and dedicated to this. I mean, Ed did, his bit. And of course, he was a self-proclaimed demonologist. Both of them very strongly rooted in their religion, which, again, I don't necessarily have an issue with, but I did find limitations in how to explain what was being experienced. You can go to an exorcism, or rather see an exorcism or read about one that was performed by them, and it may not be as relatable as you hope it to be because it's just drowned in this religious dogma, which for them worked because that's what they had invested faith into. That's where their intention lay. So they were protected by that notion, one way or another. But I do believe that they did some good work. They set the foundation for many of us in respect to interest in this field and getting to the root of whatever is occurring out there. The beautiful thing I like about the duo is that Ed tended to be a little bit more logical in certain respects, whereas Lorraine was sitting more on the right brain perception of things. Together, they were a great team.
What was there? I want to go visit this place. They mentioned some place up in Maine. Was it a lighthouse or something?
Sounds very familiar. I honestly can't recall.
But they found this. I told the story on my channel where they found some hunter found this like 6 foot tall porcelain statue of like a demon. Did you ever hear that story?
Again, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's in their museum. Some hunter came across it and he didn't want to touch it, and he got lost in the woods, and he's walking out of the woods, and he said there was this guy dressed in a suit with like gray hair and a gray beard, and he was walking step for step with the hunter out, and the hunter was lost, and he was like, how do I get out of here? And the guy, it sounds like a Hammer horror kind of a movie, he just pointed in the way to get out of it. So he knew some people that knew the Warrens, and he told Ed Warren about this, and he went down and retrieved the statue, and he said that the guy that he had encountered was a satanic high priest, and this was in Sandy Hook. This was in the woods around the school, which is very strange.
As you're, reiterating this story for us, it's coming back to me a little bit more. It's very curious.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's there are many organizations out there that could take claim to something like that, but there are overarching organizations that perhaps have more precedence than others. But yeah, I mean, that's fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, part of what people do.
Now, you're also into the ethology subject also. Now, who do you work with? Are you part of an organization? And I know you do a lot of interviews on that.
I do. I work with ThirdPhaseOfMoon. I work with everybody under our umbrella: Jim Goodall, Michael Schratt, John D'Souza, Dr. Stephen Greer. I mean, you name it, the list goes on. And I'm not name dropping here. You guys have all seen us do this as we go.
Yeah.
We all have a very common goal, and that is to bring the truth to people. And yeah, of course, some people are putting time and effort into creating something like a documentary where they compile their years of research and efforts, and we're going to sell that. But at the same time, we're always out there. We're boots on the ground. We're always reporting. Third Phase of Moon drops something almost every single night. And in many cases, these are submissions from people who have caught something anomalous in the sky that they can't explain. So they send it to us to take a peek at and just give our thoughts. That's really the whole idea behind this. Let the public come to their own conclusions, but we'll all look at it together, and hopefully we can draw consensus collectively that would bring some sort of resolve to what we're seeing in the sky. But yeah, I work with a lot of these guys. Travis Walton is in the camp too. I mean, he's a fantastic dude. Plays a mean guitar, from what I hear. So maybe one of these days we'll get him on the record and we'll play a track with him. We did talk to him about it, so I think that would just be fun, to do something like that.
So what is the truth? I mean, what's the general consensus among ufologists? I mean, what do you guys think is going on? Is it interdimensional? Is it a wormhole? And if there is crafts that are able to explore our solar system, how are they getting here?
Ufology as a field is so divided, and it's
like Bigfoot.
Very well. Yes, but there's a lot more infighting and politics that have sort of arisen within ufology that honestly is it's disappointing to me, and many others who want the serious gist of what we're doing here. I can't speak for any other ufologist, and honestly, maybe I could say that I couldn't say that necessarily for paranormal folks. I mean, I think we have different consensus with certain things, but what we're seeing in the sky that's been acknowledged by our governments is that there is something anomalous, and that we don't necessarily know what it is or where it's from. That's, again, the general consensus. Now, the government loves to backpedal, and I never look to them to really give us any real information. For me, they're the showcase. They're the ones who have the most influence, and what they are saying, people are going to listen to by and large collectively. So that's really why that platform is desirable, I think, for a lot of ufologists, because again, we get more of this interest out there, and perhaps somebody has something somewhere that won't be hushed, that we can bring out and actually talk about this in a progressive sense. Many of the crafts that have been reportedly recovered in a reconnaissance type fashion belong to private organizations like Lockheed Martin, getting ahead of myself here, Skunk Works, all these different privatized organizations that have no responsibility to us or to any government faction to divulge what they have in respect to off-world material. Remember Tucker Carlson tongue slipping that one up? Yeah, okay.
No,
you can't convince me of that. He said that we were in possession of off-world, I think it was off-world material.
Really?
Right there on live broadcast. And the very next day he backpedaled and said it may be this or it may be that, but off-world vehicles, off-world material, probably misquoting him, but that's the gist of what the guy said. And this was at the beginning of when we started to see this countdown to disclosure, wherein they were going to release all these thousands of documents, and we were going to see them, which we did, which was great. Might as well just been wearing sunglasses and been blind at the same time. Everything's redacted, so thanks for all the pieces of paper. We can't read anything that's blacked out. It's really disappointing, because they can still say, well, we gave you everything we have, but you didn't show us anything.
You think that these private entities, separate from the government, have more than the government has?
Well, the government doesn't necessarily keep track of much of that. I think, again, it goes into the hands of privatized organizations, because they're the ones who are contracted to go out to those sites and clean those things up.
Private contractors.
Yes, very much private contractors. And that's where it lays, in the hands of those people, institutions, if you will. But again, it's all privatized. You can't get to it. Now, this is just for what we have and what we've found. Okay. What about what we're seeing in the sky in respect to some of these classic models, like the Tic Tac, for example, or the TR3B? These may be ours. Okay. If we've gotten certain technology and we've been able to back engineer to a certain degree, and got our hands into playing with a little bit,
Testing
we may
them.
have. Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that we've developed high technology with metapropulsion, as we would describe it, supercavitation at the helm. We can go in, all sorts of different substrates, whether it's water, air, or otherwise. There's probably a very good chance, okay, considering how much has been reported in our interactions with extraterrestrials throughout millennia, okay? They never sat down and said, from what I understand, that we're just going to give the human beings stuff, okay? We're not going to just give them information, but if we give you something, it's a gift. It's not intervention. It's a gift. What you do with it from that point is up to you and how you will move forward as a society. Now, some of the things that they've given us, apparently they're very happy with what we've done with them. Other things, not so much. So, yeah, there's a synergistic relationship that happens between extraterrestrials and, people right now in this day and age. And we've been working with different races for a very, very long time. And, they keep this hushed up for very simple reasons, and that is control and monetary gain. Okay, which both one beget the other at the very end of the day, if you really want to look at it.
So you believe that different alien races have been in contact with governments and private contractors and stuff like that? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, 100%.
Really?
Absolutely. I think there's even evidence for this.
Really? Could you explain some of the different? I know I've heard lizard people. I've heard the classic UFO greys and stuff. Are these things just? I mean, is there evidence for that?
As much as we can get into it, yes. Sorry?
No,
Go ahead.
Do you believe Bob Lazar?
Bob Lazar is a very interesting figure. I don't really have a reason to disbelieve him at this point, but I don't necessarily 100% believe him either. I mean, I'd love to sit down and talk to the guy, even if it was off camera, to just get a solid fix personally for him. But I will tell you, I did believe Phil Schneider. Okay, I absolutely believe Phil Schneider. He was a guy. He was famous for having this skirmish with an extraterrestrial race that he was contracted to dig out these DUMBs, these deep underground military bases. And, he was out in the Midwest here and, through his team drilling in, they had military police all around. This is, I guess, sort of the commonplace thing as they continued to do this. This was a high secret area, you can't have anybody traversing through, but they broke in to a cavern, which, he explains there was a stench that just wafted out and, kind of floored him for a moment. But then he saw this little thing poke its head out, and out of fear and reaction, because they're military still, they all have guns, pulled his firearm out, went to shoot at the thing. This thing pulled out something that looked like a shot at him. And as he went up to put his hand like this, or however he had it, blew off two of his fingers on, I think it was his left or right hand, had the hole in his chest for where the beam went through him, some sort of plasma beam. And he was walking around giving presentations in the 90s with material that was supposedly of extraterrestrial origin, and he would show these at the symposiums that he would go to, and he would tell a story. Now, one of the significant things about Phil is that, yes, he was in contact with all those key players I had mentioned earlier in the interview, that it inspired me as well. But every time he was up on that podium and he was talking to an audience, he would tell them flat out, he said, if I end up dead, I want you to know I didn't commit suicide. I don't want to die. I love my life. I love my family. I was killed. It took them, I think it was 14 times. Okay. Guy had been shot, been pushed off the road. I mean, there's just a multitude of different traumas this guy went through while these people were trying to get him, and they finally got him. Okay. And they made it look like a suicide. But again, in the very last speech that he had given just before he died, he reiterated what I just said. I don't want to die. It's something else. So I did believe that guy's story. There might be some people that want to punch holes into it, but, unfortunately, he's not around anymore, and we can't go further with it.
The only thing I'd be suspect there is that if it was a CIA or like a government agency, how did it take them 14 times to kill him? Those guys are very good at what they do.
Nobody's perfect. And, back in these days, of course, we don't have the same sort of technology we have today. I mean, there's a lot of sleuthing that gets involved. I found it interesting interesting that it took so many times too, but it seemed as if it started as some sort of threat rather than a deliberate action to take his life. Maybe the shots were fired and they missed him by 2 inches, but they drove off. I don't know, but that is an interesting thing. It is an interesting thing to say. Now, I know people who have had what we would consider Men in Black, the human versions, show up at their workplace and tell them to stop talking about something on air or not to release something in something they're filming. And when the person says, you know what, screw you, they say, all right, try to play nice, but we're going to have to pay your family a visit if you don't comply. And that's when most of these people have backed off. I've had people tell me this in private conversations that it's happened.
And what's this guy's name? Cashew. I know you know Cashew. She moderates on your channel too. Cashew, can you pull up this guy's name? What's his name again? The guy that ended up.
Who are we looking for?
The guy that had 14 attempts on his life.
Phil Schneider.
Phil Schneider.
Phil Schneider. Yeah.
I bet Cashew can pull up his information really, really quick. So I love this kind of stuff. And do you ever watch? There's a YouTube channel called the Y Files. I think they spoke about some battle.
Love AJ and Hecklefish.
You know who I'm talking about? He did a whole thing in the Montauk Project, and he
Dulce.
used. Right.
I do. AJ and Hecklefish.
Phil Schneider. There we go.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I
just found that channel. No, I noticed that there's a lag here too, just to make you aware. Okay, just to make you aware.
Yeah. I know you're only.
I just found him recently, and he does a fantastic job covering some of these topics that we've been talking about for years. So when I came across the Montauk Project, I thought this is great because he's not only going to give the story in its brilliant, full detail the way that Preston Nichols did, but he's going to then counter it with something that will give us more to think about. And I haven't gotten a chance to watch the Dulce one. I mentioned on the teaser that he dropped prior to that I would be doing that, but it was funny because I was driving to work that day and I was just thinking to myself out of the blue, we talk about Montauk. I mean, I'm doing a second documentary on Montauk right now. So we pour over the different black projects, Pegasus, Stargate, you name it, we can go right down the line, MK Ultra, but nobody talks about the Dulce Wars. Why not? And next thing you know, this pops up. Uncanny.
Yeah, it popped up in my feed too. Now, I'm having you just mentioned
it's a great channel
there. I'm having Doug Scott Kramer on next week. He was a survivor of Scientology, and he didn't just quit Scientology and deprogram. He went into MK Ultra and global mind control, and he went in, and he didn't just leave Scientology and denounce the whole Scientology stuff. He went really, really into like how mind control is used around the world. So we're having a part 2 next Saturday, about that whole thing when he's going,
That's
about
fantastic.
Manson, Jim Jones, that processed church and stuff like that. Stuff fascinates me. But Dulce, was it Dulce? The underground space war? With, I
used to think it was Dulce. I was corrected. It's Dulce, and I went back and forth with Rich Giordano on this. Yeah, it's Dulce, much to my chagrin. Yeah, I mean, this is a whole story that doesn't have a whole lot behind it, but the native people that have lived there, in that town, tell stories about them pulling, human bodies out, extraterrestrial bodies. There was this huge skirmish underground, and I don't remember what the conflict began over. It's been a while since I've really delved headfirst into this topic. I do plan to revisit it, but nonetheless, there's a very specific mesa out there in Dulce that everybody points to and says that's where it is. There's an underground base there. Now, I don't know how you can get, to the apex of this thing, if that's the case. And I don't know if this is in operation today. I mean, the story goes as deep that, we had something called the Dulce Papers, which apparently was absconded. Somebody who was absconded with these papers from the facility. It went down multi levels. I mean, he had details about the badges, how they looked, the colors, the security that was in each of these levels, what each of the levels contained. As AJ had mentioned, this is probably where the extraterrestrials had experimented on us biologically. That's basically what people were saying, and what these papers had outlined. Now, again, the way that we had gotten these papers in our hands in the first place, which I've never seen physically, is sort of erroneous to me in certain senses, because it might have been that he buried it in a chest somewhere under a tree, and that, I don't know the whole story behind that or how legit it is, but certainly there's something to talk about when we go into underground bases. A lot of the stuff, the surreptitious activity, happens underground, and what better place for it to happen? Might be too costly to send us out to space to do it, but we'll just burrow into the ground, no problem. Like Montauk, they say on paper, number one, anything above ground is public park at this point, right? It's owned by the state. Everything underground, which there's nothing underground officially, even the blueprints that we've obtained, there's nothing there, they say belongs to the military. So why are you going to go through that effort to state that in the land deed when it was transferred back in 2001, when it became public park? Why go through that effort if we've already said there's nothing underground? Don't worry about it. But there is. We've had people that have been underground. I don't know if it's as deep as what Preston Nichols said, but there's an underground there.
Yeah, I spoke to him last week. Montauk is Strange. What's his name again? Oh my God, I already forgot.
Brian Minnick.
Brian Minnick, yeah. Yeah, he's...
who a good guy to talk to? A good guy to talk to for Scientology. Somebody who went there, went through it, saw it all, and came out as best he could. Peter Moon. Peter Moon. He was the author. He's the author of Montauk Chronicles along with Preston Nichols. That's he was there. He's known very well for that body of work. Yeah,
I spent a week in Scientology, and that was enough. I got out of there very quick. I first came to America.
Don't blame you, brother.
And I was working on a magazine back in Ireland, and I was just reporting on everything weird around the world and stuff. It was before the internet. And I came across this thing, Scientology, and I'm like, wow, it sounds amazing. Dianetics. So as soon as I came to America, the first place I went to was the place on Beacon Street in Boston. They had a big church there, big brownstone. I walked in there and signed up for a course. I was there for a week, and I'm like, I'm out of here. These people are so strange, soulless. They had no soul.
It's curious. Well, what they do is it's a recapitulation of sort. And the first time I was introduced to this concept was back when Carlos Castaneda, as a polarizing figure that he is, talked about this at length. But I think the concepts that he embodied within his work is sound. It's not necessarily everything else. It's just a story built around it to introduce these concepts. And again, one of them was called recapitulation. Now, the idea was that you were going to go back to the very first memory that you ever had, and you're going to live through this in your mind, and you're going to blow it out in a certain ritualistic fashion. As you go through each memory, you're going to feel how you felt. You're going to relive
that was my first
everything
course.
You possibly can. Okay. Yeah. That's the parallel that Scientology has taken from those esoteric ends. Honestly, that's something that does work, but it's still a reprogramming of yourself. You're just reprogramming yourself. So again, Scientology does have some legitimacy in respect to their practices, but it's taken from somewhere else.
Oh, Buddhism, friggin' everything. Hubbard was a genius, an evil genius, but man, he was a car salesman, genius, prophet. I mean, he was amazing. And the first thing they made us do was sit and watch an hour presentation of all of his accomplishments in black and white in this big cinema room. And then they bring us in and make us take the lie detector test. And there was people literally sitting beside me doing staring contests, which is obviously, to me, is to increase your confidence in dealing with people in business and stuff. And they were just sitting the whole time, like staring at each other for like 50 minutes or something. I can't remember. But it's so fascinating.
Unbelievable. It's just another, it's a cult. Okay. It's a cult.
Oh, for sure.
It's a cult. That's it. You know what I mean? You don't have to describe it too much beyond that. That's exactly what it is. So,
and the whole thing about we go back to places like Leominster State Forest and Blood Forest. I suspect, I don't know, but I think that there could be satanic cults operating in that area, and I would love to find evidence of it.
I wonder if they're still there. I mean, if there are groups out there still doing this stuff, and we find them in the deepest parts of the woods, but I don't know. Yeah, honestly, God, I don't really know how extensive it is, and to be honest with you, I don't think I want to find out.
No. Kind of like that movie. Oh my God, the guy from Easy Rider was in it. They take their RV into this place in Texas, and they see a ritual, and then the Satanists. Oh, the devil. What the hell was it called? And the devil, the devil worshippers chase them all through the state, and they get them in the end. What was that called? Race with the Devil. That was a brilliant movie. That guy from Easy Rider. What's it? Fonda. What was his name from Easy Rider? And they witnessed a bizarre.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, they witnessed a bizarre ritual in the middle of the woods, and the satanic priests saw that they were watching them, and they chased them out of the place, and they followed them all over the state and got them in the end. Spoiler alert! It was really good.
It's sort of a classic story. Yeah,
yeah. The devil rides out. It was like during I think it was mid-70s or something. It was a really, really good movie. But I think those people are out there. I mean, I think that Bohemian Grove, there's more to that than just some rich men getting off. I definitely believe that.
Of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question about that. They have their clubhouses, and they are using techniques that are ancient. I mean, this is sort of the Illuminati had in respect to certain information. I mean, this is what they were so concerned about, is that the wrong hands would get some of this information before they were responsible enough to use it. And we have been a shining example as a species of how to misuse valuable, progressive information that we could be using to create galaxies, for God's sake. I mean, if you look at the way that things universally are supposed to go, and you talk to people who have channeled extraterrestrials, and, I don't know how much stock you put into some of these things, but when I hear people that go through these channelings, I'm listening for not only consistencies, but something that seems to make sense that I can look up. So, for example, if they mention a star system, that's where they're from. Okay, I'm going to write this name down. It's not familiar to me, but I'm going to go look it up and find that, yes, there is a star system out this way, XYZ. There can be other things to confirm it. It's a very deep rabbit hole to jump into, but long story short, we're supposed to be a universal species. That's sort of the next step. We grew up in a sense where we would learn to survive. Once we learn to survive, we can then become creative. As we already are inherently, we can be that creative being. And then once we take care of base survival, we can actually live that life. Now, we've become global, but the next step, and we're already taking measures to do it, is to become universal. And I think that there are a lot of species that are waiting for us to get to the point where we can peacefully become integrated in a universal outfit of some sort. I don't know about the Galactic Federation. I haven't seen enough within that to say definitively, yes, there is a group out there it would make sense that there would be some governing law. But the way that some people talk about it, even my good friend Kashara has mentioned that, it's sort of like their pockets that they preside over certain areas. So if you're on the outskirts somewhere, they might be able to help you at some point, but you're not really in their line of vision. So something like piracy could happen out there, or something less couth, if you will, could occur on the fringes. But yeah. If you're a Trekkie, I'm sure there's some parallel you could draw to that.
So there's someone that said that, what if we're some like lost tribe in the universal Amazon, and all these other civilizations are waiting and leaving us alone until we get to the point where we're able to accept alien life? And you know what I mean? Do you ever hear that analogy?
Well, it's possible. Oh yeah, it's absolutely possible. The problem is at this point that we've already done so much damage to this planet. I don't know if we're going to have the time.
They better hurry up.
They severely limitation on, we as a whole have put a limitation on how quickly we can take our time to learn these lessons. I mean, look at the individual who has to get knocked on the head several times with a particular lesson before they learn it. Let's say it's in a relationship, you keep toxic people, and then next thing you know, you're beat up, and you say, you know what, let me try something else. I mean, we get to a certain point where we decide to change, or we don't like the reality that we've created anymore. Let's see this happen in a more universal sense. Let's see that trickle out into the collective rather than just observing it in the individual. We don't have the time, though. I mean, nobody really knows how much time we have, but we can all say with certain conviction that it's not much considering what we've done. So I don't know. I hope to see it happen. I think that was the plan. But then again, I've also been told that this particular planet has developed at a different rate than any other life in our immediate universe has. And perhaps it has to do with the intervention of how we were created or introduced to this planet, or that there were other species that inhabited this area, this world, prior to our comeuppance, in a sense, if you will, which is sort of what we get.
Well, if there was ever a time for like some big mothership to descend upon the Earth and make everybody stop in their tracks, it's right now. Maybe above Ukraine or Russia, somewhere like that, and get everybody to look up to the heavens and put their guns down and say, "Holy shit, we got a new threat or a new thing to focus on because we're in dire straits."
They know. Well, I'll put it this way: we have observed within our own behaviors. I mean, look at what happened with, what we just went through collectively. There could be two neighbors living on a street that never really talk to each other. Maybe they didn't like each other for, petty reasons. Okay. And then this thing came around that affected everybody. Next thing you know, you can't leave your house. And so Joe talks to, Ethan next door because, he's through the window and he's bored. Next thing you know, together they say, we may not have the same belief systems or we may not even like each other, but this is something bigger that's affecting all of us. Doesn't it suck, man? Yeah, it sucks. And then you start forming an alliance that way with somebody you wouldn't normally do it because you have, as you mentioned, a threat that's greater than everybody else. The thing is that the UFOs, extraterrestrials, anything having to do with that is not a threat. It's not a threat. It never has been a threat the way that we've seen it, other than what we've dealt with certain species that have come in with certain aggressive tendencies. Your country or what have you, a group of people, whatever, they're dealt with accordingly. But by and large, my understanding is that the majority of these species are benevolent and they just simply don't interfere because it's not in our best interest. Because they can show us and give us as much as they want, but it's like the spoiled kid gets everything he wants at Christmas. At one point, he just takes it all for granted, and then what happens?
Maybe they're going to wait till the last minute before the nukes or the buttons pushed, and then they'll show themselves.
I've been told that nuclear war will bring them out of the woodwork because it's not about us and it's not about our planet specifically that has anything to do with our domain. It's because if we launch nukes, it affects other dimensions. It affects the rest of the universe. I think these beings have a much sturdier understanding of how we affect each other, in the most subtle ways. The way that you think about somebody can affect, not only that person, but affect you. I remember the time around about 11, 12 old, when I would get upset, I'd go within myself and, this guy made me upset. F that guy, freaking whatever. I just go off of my head and I felt better because I could get it out. Although I couldn't say it because if I said it, there would be a consequence, right? Well, at one point, as I was doing this, something jumped into me in a sense and had said, or I heard these words, you can't do that because it's still the same thing. And I thought in such disappointment, oh man, really? I can't even do this in my own head. At the time I was thinking God could hear me. Okay. Cause that, came from a different ideology growing up in my family. But, to me, I was very disappointed. I was like, wow, there's no escape. You have to be pure in action and in thought. Thought's the hard part.
Yeah. So what's your next project? You're working on a documentary?
So, yes, I've been working on this Montauk documentary since August. Really sooner before that, kind of leading up into what we got into. But I have had the privilege of many other people that I didn't realize would be interested in participating coming out of the woodwork to help me with this documentary. So as it has, many people are busy, especially these folks with authorship, television shows, whatever they're doing, family life even. They've taken their time to sit down and, shoot some of these interviews with me, but it's taken time to do that. So I'm used to like banging things out relatively quickly, shooting them, coming home, already have the vision, edit it, boom, post it up. Third Phase is to, blame for that, if you will. But this time I've really had to test my own patience, and it's been a challenge for me to keep that vision that I initially had, but I am, and we are making progress on it. And Jared Murphy has been an absolute godsend when it comes to, working with me on this documentary. And at this point, I feel that it's a documentary that Jared and I are putting together as a joint unit rather than just my own project. Outside of that, I will tell you tonight at 12 o'clock, midnight here Eastern time, I will be releasing an instrumental album. Okay, this is an album that I put together based on many people's requests. They very much enjoy the music I produce for Dark Hour Paranormal. I've written the bumper music on the beginning and the end. Lots of hip hop instrumentals that I used to work with. I was a producer for many years. I just sat on some of this stuff, and a lot of it's really moody. I did pop MC for 8 years, toured and put out 3 albums. Play with a lot of notable folks out here on the East Coast, if you will. Sage Francis, Exile, and Low Key. A bunch of guys. Mr. Liff from Boston. We all ran the gamut back then, but that culture was not as blown up as it is today. People weren't really aware of it like they are today. So there was the ability to, get closer to some people who had been doing it and get mentored in a sense, or, with them on certain projects. But yeah, these instrumentals will be on an album I put together called Cosmic Keys Volume 1. That does insist that there will be a Volume 2, but that will be out tonight. It's about a half hour of instrumentals that I put together with, Dark Hour Paranormal in mind, and the people that have watched and enjoyed the music that I've already done. This is for you.
Is this on your channel?
Yes, it will.
One last thing before we go. Psychedelics. What are your views, and do you think psychedelics are a doorway to another dimension, or do they just twist? You know what I mean? I don't know the word for it. Do you think they're beneficial?
I think that psychedelics are directly responsible for the new age that we experience today. And the reason for that is because back in the late 50s, 60s, going into the 70s, people were very much experimenting with certain psychedelics. I'll keep it YouTube friendly. Any hallucinogen that you can think of, people were working with, and a lot of those were organically based. Now, what happened was that they'd find themselves propelling way up into the higher vibrations, the ethers, if you will. And at those moments, people often describe being under that influence, saying there's a moment where I know everything. I understand everything. Yeah. I get it. And I believe that that's absolutely true for that very moment. Now, you're not going to be able to convey everything, but you had the experience of remembering everything, right? So what happens is that once they're on that, okay, it's still chemically based. Eventually the body works out that chemical, you come back down. So now you're left with this fleeting image of what it was like to know everything. But because it was so high vibration, once you get back into the body, so to speak, you can't anchor that memory. People will be like, I don't remember, but it was beautiful. That's because you're up in a higher vibration and you haven't anchored it down. So what psychedelics did for us was show us a window that we could walk through, but it was a temporary window. So what happened is that when people realized this, they said, there's got to be another way to get to that type of utopia. So what they did was start to get more into yoga and transcendental meditation and Kama Sutra. I mean, all these different variations of meditation and trying to get to that unified state without the substance was born over here in the West. Okay, never mind the East. The East had their own thing going. Okay, but over here in the West is what I'm commenting on. So yeah, I think that they can be very beneficial. They've certainly helped and shaped me as a person, my personality, what my interests were. When the first time I ever did a psychedelic, it blew my mind in such a respect that it opened up everything I had already known in respect to perception, but I just got to see it for a very quick moment. And it was all so familiar, like I had done it before, but I never had. And I only needed, I've done it more than once, but I only needed, upon retrospect, that one time. That was it. Just needed that one time to rip the Band-Aid off and boop, there you go. You're good to go. But, yes, to answer your question, I think very beneficial, but I don't think that they are for everyone because people do have different paths, and where it might be something that you're ready to embark in to a more peripheral sense of reality, somebody else may not be, and that's not what they agreed to come into. So again,
and you don't know until you get it. You don't know until you get in there. That's the problem. You don't know until you enter that veil.
For most people who are interested, yeah.
I mean, I took a look behind the veil
Oh,
when I was
okay.
17. My first hour was hell. After that, it was just wow. And I took magic mushrooms a lot of time because in Ireland they grow around this time of the year. So as teenagers, we took
Yep.
magic mushrooms, and I had many profound experiences like this. This is not the end. You know, we're cosmically entangled with everything, you know, and it's just hard to describe. But I wouldn't do it now because I have too much to lose, you know. But I know it's there. That's a good
They're
thing.
tools. That's what they
Yeah.
are. They're tools. And there may be a day that you come back and you need that sort of boost, if you will. And I think that's sort of what it is for many
Someday.
people that try. And you know what? I mean, I've worked with them up until my 30s, I'd say. There were a couple times in my late 30s that I worked with them, but I would always microdose. I never took a full-on dose of anything like that because I just, number one, I didn't feel I needed it, I guess. Really, is what I should say. I didn't need the entire experience of being blown out. It was enough to just, that's just to open up just a little peek into there. And, you know, the remembrance was enough. It could carry me for months or years where I don't feel compelled to revisit that. And I'm always very, very careful because especially the plants, they have a spirit associated with them. So you go and meet that spirit. And the first time I met the spirit of the mushroom, I didn't do it the right way. And she was not happy with me. And it took me many times revisiting her very, you know, slowly to learn the lesson that she originally had intended for me. And then to accept that there was some sort of forgiveness. I know it sounds weird, but there was some sort of acceptance of what I had chosen to do the way I had done it, knowing that I'd still work with her, but I had to do it on her terms.
Yeah.
That's that.
Yeah, you can't dick around with it. You gotta respect the plant. So we definitely have to go out to I want to take you to Leominster State Forest, not because I want to show you something, but I want you to show me something because I don't know what's out there. And I don't think I'm that insightful, and I need to go with someone that can maybe point something out to me, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. You know? I'll grab Jeremy Sanborn, who's asked to go out several times, and we just haven't connected, but he's still talking about going out. And again, he would be a really good person to guide us through. And I think between the two of us, you know, we certainly have things to talk about, and then you would, you know, be inspired in that sense and have plenty to add, I'm sure.
Yeah. And
so
I have a couple of good I have a couple of good trails to go on, and there are a couple of spots that weird me out, and I'd like you to take you there and tell me what you think.
Absolutely. I'm game. Let's plan it up before the snow comes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the snow is coming. It's like 1 month. Like we just got rid of all just got rid of all the leaves today, just so the snow doesn't fall on it, and it almost killed me. I mean, we've got like a mountain of, you know, do you ever see that mountain in Close Encounters of the Third Kind? That's what's in the middle of my yard at the minute. I'm like, how am I going to get rid of this?
Perfectly.
Yeah, it's huge. It's like 10 feet tall.
Oh my God! Like kids don't find that before you do. You know, clean the rest of that. You know, jumping in your pile of leaves. Next thing you know, it's all over the yard again.
I think there might be
watch those neighborhood kids. Yeah, maybe.
Mike, well, thank you very much for coming on. That was eye-opening. You know, it was great talking to you.
Well, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate that. I appreciate you inviting me to come on. And I do look forward to going out into the field with you being so close. I mean, I'm 20 minutes away from Leominster State Forest, 25 at most, I think. Or Blood Forest, I think I'm even less than that. So, I mean, anytime you want to get together, I mean, you've got my contacts. We'll get in touch, and I'm game to do it. But again, let's do this before the snow comes. I'll still go out in the snow, but let's do it when it's a little warmer.
Send me your number.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'll send it to you through the email. All right, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.